Hey YouTube, this is PokéCastXVll here, and today we'll be discussing the top 10 cards from the most recent set release, Fates Collide. Since US Nationals is fast approaching, and the other Nationals around Europe are already taking place, I figured it'd be a good time to review the most recent set, so that you can get a feel as to how the new cards impact the current metagame. Keep in mind that this is strictly my own personal opinion, so if you do feel that any cards have been missed out, or you disagree with the order, feel free to stick a comment in the comment section below. With all that said, let's begin. Number 10. At 10th place, and barely scraping in, we have Mega Alakazam EX. With a decent 210 HP and an okay attack, Zen Force does 10 damage plus 30 for each damage counter on the defending Pokemon. When you pair this with Alakazam's ability, Kinesis, and cards like Golbat and Crobat, you can certainly hit some really big numbers using Zen Force, especially when you have cards like the Evolution Spray and Super Scoop Up. It's a really fun and interesting concept, but unfortunately for Alakazam, it has a lot going against it in this current format. Hexmaniac can completely shut this deck down, as you're not able to use any of your abilities, as well as limiting your damage output. Secondly, Alakazam has an awful weakness. Not only does this deck struggle against decks like Night March, even with the Batline, but it's also extremely vulnerable to Mew, also released in the same set. Having Mew gives every deck running basic Pokemon another psychic attacker, as it's splashable due to its ability, something we'll touch on later. Certainly a fun concept, but it's not a card I'm a fan of in this current metagame. Number 9. At number 9, we have Umbreon EX. Standing at a decent 170 HP, Veil of Darkness deals 20 damage and allows you to discard cards from your hand and then draw the same amount of cards you just discarded. A pretty decent attack, and one I'm sure will be useful in certain situations, however it's its second attack that grabs my attention. Endgame deals 70 damage, which can be bumped up through cards like Fighting Fury Belt and Muscle Band, but more importantly, the state of the attack reads that if you knock out one of your opponent's Mega Pokemon, you take an additional 2 prizes, totaling 4 altogether. Mega Pokemon aren't too popular at the moment, although Umbreon certainly could be teched into any Yveltal deck as a late game sweeper. A card I'm sure we'll see play in some form or another. Number 8. Number 8 brings us Lugia. Lugia is almost an exact reprint of Bouffalant from Dragons Exalted, sharing a lot of similarities with a few minor differences. With 120 HP, Lugia has a nice sponge with its ability Pressure, reducing all damage done from attacks if Lugia is in the active spot. However, Lugia's attack Intensify Burn deals 60 damage, with an additional 60 if the defending Pokemon is an EX. Like Umbreon, Lugia can be used as a tech or in a deck in its own right, as it does have a break form. Also, with cards like Max Elixir and Double Colorless Energy, it can be powered up in a single turn. Lugia is certainly a card I really like in the format, and I'm sure it will find its way in the competitive scene in some form or another. Number 7. At number 7, we have Carbink. Carbink has a reprinted ability which we've seen on several occasions before, Suicune and Sigilyph being notable examples. Safeguard prevents all damage done to Carbink by your opponent's EX Pokemon. While players do have Hex to get around it, it can certainly be a pain trying to tackle. Another factor to Carbink is its break form, which for a single fighting energy deals 20 damage and allows you to attach 2 energy cards from your discard pile to one of your fighting Pokemon. Certainly a great form of energy acceleration, however unlike Landorus from Furious Fist, you won't be able to use the attack going second unless of course you have a Wally. Above all, Carbink's ability still stays in place when you break Evolve, making it a nice addition to fighting decks. Carbink can also feature in stall decks like Wailord, much like Suicune used to, a card that I'm sure we'll see play in some form or another in this format. Number 6. At 6th place, we have Zygarde EX. With a very impressive 190 HP, Zygarde becomes the second Pokemon in the format to have 3 attacks. Zygarde's attacks are pretty standard, dealing more damage the more energy you have attached to it. However, combined with the support we've received from Furious Fist, Zygarde can hit some ridiculously high numbers very early on in the game. Combined with Fighting Fury or Muscle Band, Strong Energy, Reggie Rocky, and Fighting Stadium, Zygarde can be quite a tank to try and take down. Much like G-Booster for Genesect EX, Zygarde also contains a tool card in Power Memory, which gives it an additional attack, dealing 200 damage but having to discard 3 energy in the process for 2 fighting energy and a colorless. However, where Zygarde struggles is dealing with decks like Night March, as even with 190 HP, they're able to one-shot your big EX for 2 prizes while responding through only taking 1. With that, Zygarde also has a very unfavourable weakness, with Vespiquen starting to pick up in play. The deck can also struggle with Greninja and Aqua Toad, two very popular decks in the current metagame. Again, another card that I do like a lot, but we'll have to wait and see how it affects the current metagame.
Number 5.
Coming in at 5th place and not too far away from its partner in crime, we have Reggie Rocky EX. Reggie Rocky is mainly used for its ability Reggie Power. Similar to Deoxys from Plasma Freeze, although with Plasma Pokemon, Regirock gives all of your fighting Pokemon an additional 10 damage when attacking, excluding other Regirock EXs. Regirock is a great addition to the already fighting support we have, allowing you to hit numbers higher than what was possible prior. Immediately, it shouldn't be difficult to see the synergy that it has with cards like Zygarde EX, Lucario EX, and Hawlucha to name a few. All cards that can attack of a single energy. However, like Zygarde, it does have an awful weakness and a heavy retreat cost, becoming Lysander bait. A card I do like a lot, but again we'll have to wait and see how it impacts the current metagame.
Number 4.
At number 4, we have Mega Audino EX. This is a card that I particularly like from the set and interests me quite a lot. For 3 colourless, Magical Symphony deals 110 damage and an additional 50 to one of your opponent's bench Pokemon if you've played a supporter card that turn. Considering that most Mega Pokemon stand at around 220 HP, there isn't too much that Mega Audino can't two-shot KO, as well as being able to take cheap KOs from the bench on things like Shaman EX. Considering how easy it is for players to take a single 1-1 or a 2-2 line of Vespiquen in their Nightmarch decks, I don't suspect that fighting decks will be too popular, allowing for Audino to take centre stage since it does have a fighting weakness. Even with that, you can pair it with cards like Yveltal as a form of energy acceleration, as well as a counter if you are worried about things like Zygarde, as both Yveltal and Yveltal EX resist fighting and Audino is a colourless. It's without a doubt a card that I'm looking forward to testing, and certainly one that I'm expecting to feature in some form or another.
Number 3.
At number 3, we have Glaceon EX. Standing at a decent 170 HP, Glaceon's first attack for a single colourless and a water deals 20 damage plus 10 more for each damage counter on the defending Pokemon. Not bad, however, it's Glaceon's second attack, Crystal Ray for a water and 2 colourless, that deals 70 damage and prevents all damage done to Glaceon EX by your opponent's evolution Pokemon. When you consider that we have decks like Vespiquen, Trevenant and Greninja and even Mega Pokemon to go with that, it certainly does lock down a lot of your opponent's attacking options. Equally, when you pair that with Jolteon EX from Generation, which locks down basic Pokemon, and you can effectively win the game just on those 2 attacks alone. Even if they do find means of getting around it with cards like Escape Rope and Lysander, it still forces your opponent to have to use resources they would have preferred not to initially. Glaceon is one of my favourite cards printed from the set, and a card that I've been testing a lot recently.
Number 2.
In second place, we have a card that we've briefly spoken about before, and that card is Mew. Mew has a decent attack, allowing you to search for a Pokemon from your deck, however it's most likely the attack of other Pokemon that you'll be using. Similar to Mew's in the past, Mew's ability Memories of Dawn allows you to copy any of your basic Pokemon's attacks, however you still need to provide the necessary energy. This gives a lot of decks a psychic attacker, as decks like Nightmarch, Seismitoad, and Jolteon Glaceon an additional outlet of a different type. Keep in mind that with a single Psychic Energy and Dimension Valley in play, you can also copy Sky Returns if you have Shaman sitting on the bench. And to top it off, Mew has free retreat. What's great about Mew is its versatility and how it can easily fit into most competitive decks. However, there are some negatives. Standing at only 50 HP, this can easily be KO'd, although if you are running Fighting Fury Belt, this can be bumped up to 90. And finally, Hex Maniac can shut off Mew's ability, meaning that you won't be able to do any damage. A card that I certainly expect to see played a lot, and one that I'm a great believer will impact the format for years to come.
Number 1.
And finally, at first place, we have the only non-Pokemon from the set, and that card is N. This card is reprinted and did initially come out during the Black and White era, and is arguably one of the best supporters we've had in the game. N forces both players to have to shuffle their hand back into their deck and then draw cards equal to the number of prizes they have. If you're beginning the game, it's a great way of replenishing your hand and putting back things in your deck that you didn't want to discard away with cards like Sycamore. And if you're falling behind in the game, it can be a great recovery card when your opponent is only limited to having 1 or 2 cards in their hand. Equally, if you're aware your opponent has a game-winning card in their hand, like a Lysander, you can play N and force them to shuffle it back into their deck. This is even more powerful when your opponent is under item lock. Another factor that makes N so versatile is VS Seeker, as having a copy or two in your discard pile allows you to revive one and play it. In the black and white format, it was quite common to run at least 3 or 4, however with VS Seeker, most players will most likely only run a copy or 2. A card I have mixed feelings about it being back in the format, however, there is no denying how powerful this card is and the impact that it'll create. And so there you pretty much have it, that is my top 10 cards from Fates Collide all concluded for you. If you would like to see more Pokemon related content as well as my top 10 decks for Nationals, be sure to check out the annotations at the end of this video. Alternatively, if you would like to see more Pokemon related content, all you have to do is click the subscribe button. Otherwise, that leaves me to say thank you very much for watching, and I will see you all next time.